Right, a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. It is Thursday morning. That's right, it is Thursday morning, the 26th. Had to lift that one up. 26th of March here, and we're with you every morning on OTB AM from 7:30 until 9:30. If you join us late, don't worry. On Periscope, you can spool back, or you can catch us on YouTube, or you can get the podcast if you don't want to look at our ugly mugs of a morning. Owen Sheehan, good morning to you. How are you?
Very well, Ger. How are you?
You're kind of like in the Big Brother house. You know, this is like day 77 in the Big Brother house. We didn't talk about the Big Brother situation in Germany, did we? Or did we talk about this on air where they didn't tell everybody in the Big Brother house in Germany what was going on? And then I didn't see the episode, but like I would dearly like to see an English subtitled version of the episode where they told everybody, by the way, there's a global pandemic ripping through Europe at the moment, and you know, this might be the safest place for you.
Yeah, God, I forgot about this actually. German Big Brother cast told about pandemic live on television. This was shortly after St. Patrick's Day. Much like yourself, I realised that this thing was a story when the producers had said, yes, we are going to tell them. You know, it's good of them to uphold one of the founding principles of Big Brother, that you would not be told about anything from the outside world. I often used to wonder, on World Cup years and the European Championships years, how they managed to do it, not knowing quite exactly how England were getting on in the World Cup. But on this case, like I'm just reading the BBC article on it now, one contestant who's a carer burst into tears and reportedly said she was worried about her mum who has a lung condition. So what a thing to drop on somebody immediately, that they're stuck in there, and to say, oh, by the way, people who you love, their lives are at risk. So that's a fairly, I guess, a bit of a plot twist for people who were in there and for everybody in general. I'm not sure, did they actually cancel the whole thing? I presume they did.
I don't think so. I think the plan was to keep it going. Certainly it was at the time, but I haven't seen since. So maybe they've seen better, or maybe they've decided that actually their Z-list celebrity ambitions are best served by being one of the few remaining things that's on TV during a global pandemic. I don't know.
Well, I guess they're quarantined from everything, aren't they? So they will also be safe, and it's one of the things that can continue to go ahead. Like I don't know, it's a very good idea. You've now put Big Brother into my head. Like we've spoken about a lot of weird things that people have been binging. I did actually start watching back all seasons of Big Brother at one point.
No.
A few years ago.
No.
I can't remember exactly what the reason was. I think I was like when I was in college.
Where are they?
They're on YouTube. Like a lot of them are on YouTube.
All the way back to like the original 2000s,
no,
first one.
Not right. Like there was obviously a very good twist at the end where there was a guy who was leaving notes all around the Big Brother house and he got found out. So that was a great twist at the end, but I think the whole season was kind of poor. So I went about a few seasons in when you had the likes of Nikki, the most iconic, you know, the Who Is She rant series, and I think it was at the end, and there was like a big fight in the house that year as well. So I got to the fight where they had like set up another bed sit beside the house, and they were watching the original house and like setting tasks on people, while the people in the original house had thought those two women had been kicked out of the house. So there was an incredible twist when they were actually brought back in, and there was a big fight. I think shortly thereafter I stopped watching it, but that was a good 50 to 60 episodes into the season. So yeah, like it hasn't even taken COVID-19 for me to reach my lowest point as a binge watcher.
You were in college when you were doing this, were you?
I think it was like a month of study for one exam that I had. So.
Okay, so you had nothing to do. Did you have a relationship at the time, Owen? I'm willing to bet no.
You probably saw that answer coming. But, you know, Big Brother is as good a relationship for any person in college, is what I say.
Nikki was 2003. Big Brother 7, it says here. Can that be right?
Big Brother 7? It can't have been 7, because the first one was...
Oh, Big Brother 7 was 2006. 2006
okay.
says, before Fame, 2003, on her Wikipedia page. Sorry, I just saw... I thought the first entry would be her Big Brother, but no, they went back, they delved deep into the life of Nikki Graham, which is her name.
Nikki Graham.
What age were you in 2006?
Like 12. I do vaguely remember it being on. I remember it starting, but I wouldn't have been allowed to watch that.
This is a wormhole I hadn't intended to go down, because there's genuine sports news-ish over the last 24 hours where those crazy French bastards are talking about hosting the Tour de France behind closed doors, was the phrase that was used, as in the crowd won't come out and sit at the side of the street and drink all day, which kind of takes away the magic of the Tour de France.
I would have thought the Tour de France is the one sporting event where social distancing is actually upheld at its most, even on a regular year. So what you would do is just take away the start town and that any fans getting into the start town, and there would be no village beforehand, and same at the finish line as well for every stage. But generally, it's like a couple sitting in front of their caravan, or a family sitting out the front of their house as the race goes by. So that is the vast majority of live fans. As the Tour de France organisers have said over the last couple of days, the vast majority of their income comes from television rights, because people aren't paying in to watch the Tour de France. They might be paying something to at the start village or at the end town, but that's about it. So like, it's a shout. Like, we've been speaking about what are the things that can possibly go ahead first, and it's definitely a shout that cycling could be the thing that goes ahead. Like, you just have to be worried about these teams that are camped up in hotels for long periods of time
and buses.
Yeah, and buses, like, insanely close to one another.
Yeah.
Like, if you had even a smidge of a condition that could be passed on, it will be passed on in the Tour de France. It doesn't matter when you're out there and you're hundreds of meters apart from one another on the track. Once you get into your bus and once you get into your hotel that night, you were in close quarters for the guts of a month. So, that's the one concern you would have. But fans-wise, social distancing could be perfectly implementable into the Tour de France.
Okay, I'm not sure I see that on. I think that once the athletes are so close to each other, like, unless they've all had it, you can have teams of, you can only pick people who've already had it, so they have the antibodies and they're going to be fine. They're going to pass it on.
Just to clarify, I do mean that if the athletes are in danger, this thing should not be going ahead, no question about it. But if you're looking at a purely fans point of view, then I think you can actually implement social distancing fairly well. But like, is that not a preventative measure? Is that not a measure to actually flatten the curve, rather than when we're in the middle of the summer and this thing is right after its peak, that perhaps social distancing is not an acceptable way to actually do anything? That, as you say, the behind closed doors element, no fans allowed to watch it, might be the way. But like, it is hard to see how you could actually have a safe team bus or a safe hotel anytime soon.
Yeah. I mean, until we get to that point where somehow everybody has worked out a way to do that, we are certainly groping in the dark at the moment for what's coming next. 7:38, it says on the clock above your head over there. In Gaelic Games news overnight, all GAA facilities are to remain closed until April 19th. Director General Tom Ryan has requested that all pitches, walkways and gathering areas be sealed off in line with new government guidelines. Ryan says they're working hard to ensure the GAA is in the best possible state when games are allowed to resume. We haven't heard from Tommy Rooney about the abandoned GAA pitch in West Clare, which at some point might actually become a place of pilgrimage, Owen, given that Tommy is trying to claim that he's kicked the most remote point in Irish history. And technically it's an old GAA ground, so it might not be closed to run-of-the-mill hoi polloi Tommy and his buddies.
True. Has he actually claimed to kick the most remote point in Ireland? I don't think that's possible, really, to be honest. I think the most remote point in Ireland has to have been kicked
on the islands.
On the islands, or in one of the four corners, really, or an island off one of the four corners. Ideally, that would be where the most remote point to be kicked. Like, isn't there a fantastic pitch on the Aran Islands that often gets shared around when people are like, look at these epic sports grounds? That's the one that kind of sticks out as the most remote point. But Tommy's was impressive. He was kind of lurking around uninhabited fields there over the course of the weekend. It was on his Instagram account, and it actually kind of looked pretty epic, to be honest with you, where there was this abandoned pitch with old goalposts, old dressing rooms still standing. You could work away and kick the ball over the bar. So I just assumed that this was a thing over the last couple of days. I know that there was some Kerry footballers spotted kicking the ball to one another on Inch Beach down at the weekend as well. So people haven't exactly been needing to go into GAA pitches to get their kick around on.
I mean, obviously you're not supposed to be doing that, but if you wear gloves, is it all right? Like, is that, so long as you're not like shouldering each other sweatily, kicking the ball to each other, is that pucking a ball to each other?
You'd imagine if you're of inter-county standard, drive to the area where you're going to kick the ball to each other separately, stay 40 or whatever, 20 to 40 yards away from one another, and no ball's going to go astray because you're that good. And you can just get back into your car and drive away again, having not had to come into contact with anybody. I'm sure it's something that people have been engaging in over the last couple of weeks as they proceed to lose their mind.
In tennis, the fate of this year's Wimbledon Championships will be decided next week. An emergency meeting of the All England Club's main board will decide whether to postpone, cancel or go ahead with the 134th Championships. The French Open at Roland Garros has already been pushed back to late September. The All England clubs say postponing or cancelling the championship were options, but not playing behind closed doors. So cancelling it seems a little bit early. Certainly, wouldn't it be great for this to be the 2 weeks after the American, after the US Open, or even like give everybody a week off after the US Open and then play Wimbledon? Like, it's not going to be, it's not going to be bright all day. Start a good bit earlier. Start at 10 o'clock every morning. Finish at 4, except on the main courts. Play them under lights. Do they have lights on the main courts? They must have, because they've got a roof.
Presume they do. Like, I've never seen them ever need it at Wimbledon, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, it's not a bad shout. Like last year, if you go by our climate last year, you could play lawn tennis right the way up to November. Is that too much of a stretch?
No.
I don't recall anything prior to Christmas even being that bad. As you say, it's just a dying light. But if you give yourself potentially even an extra couple of days, if you started even in a couple of days earlier and just string it out a little bit more, it's a possibility. We're set up. Hopefully, we're set up for a fairly epic autumn of sport where everything is just concluding together. All these championships, as I say, fingers crossed that this thing can actually turn around. But every sports organisation is now looking towards either a September start date or a finish date, and then even come next year there'll be like a big compression as well. When there's like a story this morning about a potential springtime Olympic Games next year as well. So those bumper weekends of sport of the past potentially have nothing on what's coming down the tracks.
Well, there's a 9-month run, hopefully, from September all the way through to next summer, where you're going to have the Euros, the Olympics, the 4 major tennis tournaments, the 4 major golf tournaments potentially, and the conclusion of this season's Champions League, Premier League, European Cup Rugby.
And championships, let's face it, in GAA.
The championships, exactly. September is going to be a pretty good month. We can all look forward to September.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Let's hope so. But it's something to certainly get a little bit hopeful about.
Here's what's coming up on the show this morning. 7:43 a.m. here on OTB AM. Ger and Owen with you every morning from 7:30 to 9:30. Our lockdown latest, is that what we're calling it? What did we come up with a better name on?
No, the lockdown latest is 100% the bang average name we are using for this.
8 o'clock. Owen's address to the nation at 8:15. If you haven't seen this yet, then you're in for a treat. Off the couch at 8:20 every day at noon. Sorry, every day at 1 o'clock. Off the couch is released on all of our social channels, but we speak to whoever's doing it for us at 8:20 every morning. And it's Andy Moran, the Mayo legend, who's going to join us around about 8:20 to talk to us about, again, being a small business owner and what we can all do from our homes to keep ourselves sane. Will O'Callaghan's going to run us through the latest sports news at 8:45 and also introduce the new podcast that the lads have done. Is it called Off the Ropes?
Off the Top Rope.
Off the Top Rope.
I was hoping to go for Off the Turnbuckle. Same thing really, I guess, isn't it?
So that's coming your way at, we'll play you a little bit of it as well at 8:55 this morning. And then we're talking to 2 Kennedys from New York. So James Kennedy is the founder and owner of Rugby United New York. He's also works in the construction industry. He's got a construction business in New York City. And Johnny Kennedy, who is another friend of the show, who runs a couple of bars, the Long Hall Pub in particular, just checking in with them to see what exactly the situation is like on the ground for Irish people. Horrific scenes coming from New York and the details of how the state and the city in particular has been impacted by the coronavirus. The news is pretty bleak from there over the last 3 or 4 days in particular. You're starting to see healthcare workers dying as a result of contracting the coronavirus while treating patients in New York City. So we'll talk to the lads about what else is happening over in New York City and how the city is responding to it and what the impact has been like for Irish people over there. That's coming your way at around about 9:05 this morning. Now, 7:45, time for the newspapers.
OTB AM.
We're going to start as ever with offtheball.com. We recommend you get onto the website this morning for your latest news and information when it comes to what's happening around the world of sport and also, of course, what's happening with some of the big interviews that we're bringing for you. Latest news is that GMAC is worried about whether or not he's going to be qualified for participation at this year's rescheduled Masters whenever it actually happens. He's just inside the world's top 50 and had been due to tee it up at Augusta before the first major of the season was postponed. So it's now likely to be pushed back to the autumn, and He told a PGA conference call that all the players on tour are now playing a waiting game because they don't know what's happening there. On the lips, O'Gara and Stringer discussed Munster's kiss and make up policy, which obviously is one of those policies that's going to have to be kicked out for the foreseeable future anyway. Whenever you row, you had to kiss, and it had to be on the lips. So the two lads were on last night with Joe talking about what makes great partnerships. We also did a great piece about the opening of Croke Park with Kevin Doyle, Kevin Kilban, John O'Shea, and the GAA president at the time, Sean Kelly. Wanted for crimes against Irish football, Kilban, Doyle and O'Shea on Staunton Rain. And the Staunton talking about the canal end, Croke Park's Peter McKenna on history. Peter McKenna also as part of that deep dive. So a great little piece of history for you last night if you were unfamiliar with Rule 42 and all that and how it came to be. Then some great stuff for you last night, available on all our podcasts. And still clinging on there, Dream Team top 10 Harchester United players of all time. This is Colin Bouygues' piece.
I've got nothing to do with this.
Right. But you inspired it. You gave it cover. You're a fellow traveller, I believe, is how it would be described in Irish political terms. Right, so I want to bring you the Racing Post from cover this morning. I don't normally start with the Racing Post, but this will be the last Racing Post for the foreseeable future. And it's a picture of various people from the racing industry. And see you soon. We're taking a short break, but we'll be back when racing resumes. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay home. So it's a slimmer paper today, 44 pages, but the Racing Post have taken the very difficult decision to stop publishing until racing comes back. And Tom Kerr, the editor, says, it's with great sadness I must announce that following today's edition, the Racing Post will be temporarily suspending publication, with racing in Britain and Ireland halted, betting shops closed, and our government's urging everyone to stay at home as much as possible to slow the spread of the virus. We've been left with no other choice. I wish all our readers the very best. Join us online, but above all, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay home. So, very difficult times for the sports industry, very difficult times for racing. And again, we've seen loads of newspapers lay off staff locally here over the last while, and the Racing Post has taken the decision to stop publishing. So, it's a bit of an iconic newspaper for the last 30 years, and it's not going to be on your newsstands tomorrow. So, if people want to support newspapers and radio stations and TV stations, now would be a good time to do it, because it turns out they're important for getting the information out there. What have you got for us, Owen?
The Irish Independent this morning leads with GAA instructs a complete shutdown of all facilities. The GAA has ordered all clubs to close their facilities completely in response to the coronavirus pandemic. This means that individual players won't be free to use club pitches for solitary practice sessions or even to avail of a club gym when no one else is present. You've also got Jack Carty praising equitable IRFU move to protect jobs. This is Jack Carty believes the IRFU made the best of a bad situation by implementing pay deferrals for the duration of the current crisis. Neil Francis is writing this morning saying we cannot let England's bad boys become the new normal, or Reardon remaining down under as AFL braces itself, and something we'll get into later in the show, why Atalanta versus Valencia has become known as Game Zero.
Yeah, that Neil Francis piece is essentially what Brian O'Driscoll was saying as well about Farrell and the taunting and England's attitude. You can dig that out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/off the ball, and you can look back at that and listen to the podcast. Next up, we have the Irish Examiner this morning. And the front page of the Examiner is Kerrigan expects no reward for Cork's fine league form. This is John Fogarty speaking with Paul Kerrigan. And then revenue hit, but coronavirus will also save the GAA money. So John Fogarty's gone through heat, light and power, accommodation, insurance, marketing, match day running costs, mileage, which is obviously a big enough amount, $1.5 million, meals and nutrition, 1.2 million, pardon me, in vouched nutrition expenses, pitch upkeep, playing gear and equipment. Obviously O'Neill's shut last week, but are back up and running. It says here, manufacturing antibacterial masks and professional fees, physios, masseurs, strength and conditioning, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely going to be cheaper to run an inter-county team this year than it has been in the past. And about the leagues, Alan, what do you think? What should happen? So if this year's league isn't completed, Cork, who have won 5 from 5, are a point short of guaranteed promotion. And even if they had guaranteed promotion and the league isn't finished, can teams come down? What happens? This is a bit of a conundrum for the GAA to fix.
So if we come back mid-summer, I really can't see the leagues being played at that point. Like, it's not just the inter-county game we have to worry about here. It is a club calendar which is already hugely compressed. I think the league is going to be scrapped. I think that it's just going to be, the plug is just going to be pulled, and Cork won't get their promotion. Meath, Mayo, for example, won't get their relegation. Fermanagh, isn't it? Going down from Division 2 won't get their relegation. Like, even if Cork had the required number of points this time, at this stage, to get automatic promotion, there's no team that got the required points in Division 2 to come down. So you can't actually make that change. And even if you could, it seems a bit weird that nothing else would happen and you're allowing teams to get promoted and relegated. Cork clearly deserve to get promoted. They are going to get promoted if the thing resumes. But it's just hard to see the resumption of this competition at some point before the end of the year. Like, is it a situation where maybe you get rid of the league finals and then you just run the thing off, and whoever finishes top of each table will be crowned league champion for that division?
Yeah.
That's one weekend less to play.
Yeah, you could do that, right? Wouldn't that make sense?
But one weekend, how much of a difference is that going to make?
Well, sorry, I'm saying it would make sense if you have these games, the last few games, as pre-season warm-ups for everybody to get some level of fitness and playing time into players' legs, so that whenever the championship starts, if it is straight knockout, it's not just going to be one game. So you've got 2 league games left for everybody, right? And I don't know, can you play that? Can you do hurling and football? You don't need hurling at all, do you? Because all of that was already decided, I think, was it?
There was we were into the knockout stages of the hurling.
Yes.
So maybe you just leave that. Maybe you leave all the knockout stages of all the leagues. Like, you had sorted your relegation in hurling. The business was done,
So,
as far as I'm concerned.
Grant, so what you do need is some kind of business being done so that Cork aren't punished for being good, and they actually get the opportunity to go up next season, because they clearly were a team who were going to get promotion. I think Louth had 1 point in their division and they were due to play Cork, so Cork needed 1 more point. Play those games as a pre-season warm-up and then get straight into your straight knockout? Is that a way around this?
It's not the worst idea. Definitely not the worst idea I've heard. Like, what do you give them? Do you give them a weekend off in between the conclusion of the regular season of the league and then the beginning of the championship? That could certainly be an option. And I guess some people might argue that you would like to have your challenge games or whatever going into the championship, but I just don't think we have that luxury at this point. Like,
these are those for you. That's exactly what these games are. And I don't think you need a week off either. Like, you know, I mean, maybe if you're going to be the All-Ireland champions, you'll end up playing 7 games in a row if you end up playing 2 league games. But, sorry, maybe you only play the league games that matter. So if there are dead rubber games in Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4, you don't bother playing those unless the teams involved want them as games. Another alternative is that next season you actually don't have Divisions 1, 2, 3 and 4, but Divisions 1 and 2 merge, Divisions 3 and 4 merge, and you sort out who's in Division 1 and 2 and who's in Division 3 and 4 over the next couple of years. So the 2 bottom teams, you do conferences for those 2 giant ones, and then the 2 bottom teams in both get relegated, the 2 top teams in both, they get promoted, and away you go. Seems like I might be complicating things a bit there, but it made sense in my head when I thought about it yesterday.
Is there a possibility of flipping the calendar and going back to the old style of playing the league at the end of the year as your sort of promotion relegation to Tier 2, which would not come into play until 2021?
Yeah, you could totally do that. And again, we're all going to be crying. But then, like, the club matches that have not had any opportunity to be played, that's when they're supposed to be being played, and that would be a window for them in the reasonable weather of October and November to get those games played. And that might be more important for everybody else's mental health, to like get out and play games for the sport that they've been cooped up and away from for so long.
Potentially, or the GAA might just say, listen, this is a terrible situation. Of course it is. But clubs that are involved in county championships and are still going in their club championship can proceed. The counties who are playing their leagues will just have to make do without their club players who are still involved in the business end of that. Like, even if you said it out loud, it's just ridiculous, because like that only ever worked in the past when you had All Ireland championships that were underway, so you only had one club. But no, you can't. What am I talking? You cannot run the league and a club championship if you get to the All Ireland stage. If you get, or even post your county finals and you get to the provincial stage, at that point, then could you start the national leagues, and then every county is just missing one club from their inter-county setup. They've had to deal with that. Oftentimes, they've had to deal with that in the past when it came to club championship finals in the month of March. So they could possibly put up with it again. But there's going to have to be more overlap than ever. The problem is, in the best year possible, there is already overlap in the GAA calendar. So we're running into very, very tight corners here already.
Yeah. So everything needs to be truncated. Like maybe you can't play the league and you just, everybody decides, tough luck, that was really hard on Cork. They're going to get the benefits of this at some point down the road. They did look like they were a team who were developing and emerging and harnessing the talent, and
Well, here's the thing about that. Just don't play the Tailteann Cup this year. Don't allow Cork to be punished for not getting promoted this year. The punishment for not getting promoted is playing in a Tier 2 championship. Just park that until 2021. If Cork get promoted from Division 3 in 2021, they will not be in the Tailteann Cup. And therefore, they have avoided ever being a Tier 2 county by definition, by the new definition that we have of that. So I think that could be a workaround, that the punishment wouldn't be as severe, that you are playing the Tier 1 championship. Now, granted, it's just because there is no Tier 2 that actually exists. That's how you're avoiding your punishment. And maybe they do want to get that underway this summer. We don't know what their plans are for that quite yet, considering it's the first every year.
Yeah. And look, again, they probably won't play that this year, but as I made the point yesterday, it would actually be good for the teams who get knocked out. If there's no league and there's straight knockout, then there's one inter-county match for literally half of the country to look forward to for the rest of the year. And maybe we need a bit more than that, just like to talk about and to watch and to get enthusiastic about and to have the opportunity to go and see and to listen to.
Maybe. And maybe the back door is all towards Sam Maguire. That's like the idea, I think, with Sean Kelly, who had floated this idea last week, that you'd have a 32-team championship. All the first-round losers would then go into the Tailteann Cup.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe all the first-round losers actually play off against one another, or
for a backdoor,
draw with the second-round losers, and then there's a draw, and then there's like a bye week, for example, for first-round winners or whatever, that can be brought into play because of the close compression of fixtures. A bye week could be something that would be very valuable. Like, these are all the different options that could come into play if you are playing a straight knockout competition. I think the number one thing that the GAA will be proceeding with is all options are on the table, and we cannot afford to cling to any notions of tradition this year. I think you just have to play things in the most efficient way possible. There's enough time for tradition in 2021.
Yeah, and we can have good long conversations about that when the time comes. You got the Irish Times for us next, Owen?
Yeah, Barcelona considering a 70% pay cut for as long as lockdown lasts. Sid Lowe is writing this morning that the club is the only one in La Liga to admit they are looking at ways to reduce the economic impact of the coronavirus. Ian O'Riordan, meanwhile, is asking what Tokyo 2020 might look like in 2021. No athletes' village and fewer sports and venues are among the possibilities. And how Trojan giant Ryan changed the face of boxing. This is Dave Hannigan writing about Paddy Ryan in the early 1920s, and as you've mentioned there already, Chair, Racing Post stops publishing for the time being. Final story there, then at the bottom of the Irish Times, RFU will ask Jones to take a pay cut in light of massive losses.
Eddie Jones, the second highest paid coach in the international game, on 750 grand a year, 820,000 euros, is going to be asked to take, it looks like a pay cut, potentially 50 grand, maybe a bit more. For him in terms of the reduction in his fee. Who's the highest paid coach in World Rugby?
So what, Eddie Jones is the highest paid in the Six Nations?
This is the second highest paid coach in the international game.
Oh, sorry. You'd imagine Foster?
I'm not sure. But isn't the whole point about the New Zealand job, it's a job that you love to do because it's your patriotic duty to do it, and so you don't sting the country for as much as you can possibly get out of them?
Does Razzie Erasmus get an extra few quid for the sort of dual purpose of his role, being a director of rugby, really, for South Africa? Maybe he's the highest paid player?
Maybe for winning it, there was a bonus to the point where he became, for momentarily, a bit like the extra 9 million that Antonio Conte got last year to top up his salary. That Ian O'Riordan piece is interesting to talk about what Tokyo 2020 might look like in 2021. Makes the point that hundreds of units in the 23 tower blocks comprising the Athletes' Village have already been sold. So, as you would expect, the developer puts the plans up for the Athlete Village, sells stuff off the plans. They'll be available to move into the week after the Olympic Games is over. And now all of a sudden it's like, I've given you my deposit for this apartment and I don't have this apartment until another year, or I'm going to have to move out for a month because some athlete wants to come and like do whatever it is that the athletes get up to in the Athletes' Village. No thanks. I'm going to take my house and I'm going to keep it. No?
Yeah, I can't imagine too many people would be interested in subletting their apartment to any athletes for the duration of the Olympics. Somehow they might just need to build a new athletes' village or find someone somewhere, or else the IOC needs to pay that developer and say, listen, actually, we are going to overrun the rent that you thought that you were going to actually get, and we're going to pay your rent until next year, and you're going to keep those apartments vacant, which kind of seems really grotesque, but it might be an option for the IOC.
And you can see where the money starts to pile up pretty quickly. And then obviously the golf clubs were recommended to close by the GUI and the ILGU. Clubs big and small concerned over the future is the headline on Philip Reed's piece, which takes us nicely to the Mail, which I know is actually one of the papers that you were supposed to do on, and I'm skipping the order here, so maybe I'll go back to that and I'll go back to the Guardian instead, which is the order I'm being told to stick to. So if we've got the Guardian next, the back page headline is about Wimbledon. It's Novak Djokovic and Simona Halep unlikely to be able to defend the Wimbledon titles that they won last year. Emergency meeting called with prospects looking bleak. And Premiership clubs to face claims for wage cuts. Premiership clubs are likely to face claims of unlawful deduction of wages amid growing player unrest at the blanket 25% pay cuts imposed. It's understood there's a sense of frustration at a number of clubs, particularly from players whose contracts expire in the summer, and action is expected to be taken. Yesterday, this is rugby obviously, London Irish became the latest club to confirm that it implemented the reduction in wages, with the Premiership suspended until the 24th of April owing to coronavirus. So we'll see what happens with the rugby players. And in terms of the tennis, it's a matter of finding a window, and there aren't many of those for big sporting events. American TV, to a large extent, determines when a lot of these events can take place. It's not just about the tennis schedule. There's NFL, college sport, baseball, golf, and to a much lesser extent, ice hockey, soccer, and tennis. So it's going to be very interesting to see if they can find a window. So when Roland Garros and the organisers of the French Open were criticised during the week for going off on a solo run, what they were doing was staking out their territory. We've got these 2 weeks in September, lads. What are you going to do? What are your plans? Oh, you've got other plans. Oh, you don't have plans yet? Well, we may have plans. We've got those 2 weeks in September. So, outflanked. Wimbledon outflanked by the French again.
Yeah. I've got the Irish Daily Mirror this morning. Waging war is the headline. Prem and EFL stars to be asked to take pay cuts and salary deferrals. Reality bites as football feels the pinch. Reds are raring to go on £120 million Sancho. Meanwhile, this is Manchester United confident, increasingly confident, the Mirror says, of landing Jadon Sancho on a £120 million deal this summer. They're in pole position to bring him back to the Premier League, with domestic rivals balking at the fee wanted by Borussia Dortmund. 120 million? I think that's probably worth it for Jadon Sancho in today's market. I think if you're balking at that, you don't realise what way the market is trending at the moment. You've got
the global pandemic on.
Football and transfers, as we established yesterday, doesn't sleep. Are we actually going to expect football transfers to nosedive as a result of this?
Yes.
Do we think so?
Yes. Well, let's think about the knock-on impact of the TV rights. Do the TV companies pay for matches that don't take place? Probably not. So if matches don't take place, and if there's a suspension of any part of this season or next season, then the amount of money that the clubs have goes down. Will the clubs just go, oh, look, we've agreed to pay you all this money, but actually there's been a global pandemic and clauses in all our contracts are like, woo, we can get out of this if we need to. There's no way that they're going to pay the players the same amount of money. And if they're not paying the players the same amount of money, why would you invest so much money in that asset in the first place?
It's true. Like, I'm trying to think of the last recession and how the transfer market seemed to accelerate through it. I know that was a kind of a far different situation, that you don't have to pull the plug pulled globally all at once in a certain manner. The game didn't come to a standstill, and television rights wouldn't have been affected that way. I just think that in the past, in the recent past, there's been a situation where football has kind of been immune to a point. That's kind of my thinking behind it. But what you're saying is probably, it's also a thing where like agents are now in a very powerful position to say, well, my player got a pay cut, you will let him leave the club, or you will, or whatever the situation is. I think there might be a little bit more fluidity on that front. Like, are we talking a 120 million fee for Sancho's now, a 100 million fee?
Yeah.
Or are we talking like still? I mean, we're talking in football terms. We're talking small change here. Like 120 million pounds for Sancho. Could that happen after an economic downturn? Could it still happen? Possibly, but then I guess the idea of clubs balking at a 120 million pound transfer fee is probably more understandable in the current climate.
So the Telegraph, back page of the Telegraph is chaos reigns over long delay to games. IOC sets up task force to resolve long list of issues, fears over date, qualifying, funding and logistics. It is a bit of a logistical nightmare when you've had this thing in the books for 6 to 8 years and all of a sudden it's like, no, I can't have it. National treasure, oldest living winning jockey, 60 years on. Mission accomplished. Jerry Scott with Merriman 2 and Barney Baker, who looked after the horse, at trainer Neville Crump's yard following their Grand National victory in the 1960 race at Aintree. And the RFU are going to provide 7 million relief for grassroots but faces 50 million hit. The RFU and their executive team are going to take a pay cut as well. Plan to offer NHS heroes free tickets gets cool response. So, there's a football story. Plan to make 100,000 free tickets available to NHS workers across professional football as a thank you has met with surprisingly lukewarm response from some Premier League clubs. Remarkably, the clubs appear to be reluctant to sign up to an initiative launched by Brighton, who promised 1,000 tickets, and which was immediately backed by Bournemouth, who matched that figure for all key workers. Brighton invited other Premier League, Football League, Scottish and Northern Irish senior clubs to join the campaign by handing the baton to one another, but the scheme has met with opposition. So, there you go.
The Irish Daily Mail, Ger, this is the story you want to get into. Rogue golfers. Clubs warned as restriction rules ignored. So golf authorities last night moved to clamp down on rogue golfers flouting the restriction directives imposed to combat the spread of the coronavirus. Sportsmail understands players were still accessing various courses around the country yesterday, despite Tuesday's announcement by golf bodies that all clubs' practice facilities and courses across the island close with immediate effect. So the GUI communications chief, Alan Kelly, confirmed that all clubs affiliated to the GUI and Irish Ladies Golf Unit have been warned by email about the restrictions being breached and how further offences would not be tolerated. So it seems that people are still sneaking out for a couple of holes. There
were a couple of clubs that were open. They were saying, look, we've taken all precautions properly. We're observing social distance. It kind of fits the criteria of getting some exercise, as Leo Varadkar said in the speech. So we'll see what happens with that. The the Star is next. Star here is next, back page of the Irish Daily Star. Prem brace for pay cuts is that headline. And then Sligo GAA warns clubs. Sligo GAA have issued a warning letter to clubs indicating they have strong evidence that at least one adult club team have continued with collective training despite the ongoing coronavirus crisis. If anybody's organising collective training and anybody gets sick as a result of that, there should be significant repercussions for that. You shouldn't be allowed to get away with this kind of stuff. Like, if the local pushback from society isn't strong enough to stop this, then the message hasn't got through. You can't be organising collective training. Like, it's ridiculous and it's dangerous and it's irresponsible. So if there is strong evidence that that's happening, then they should give that to the guards and the guards should go up with batons. Anyway, we don't live in a police state, but we're getting that direction. United aim for Sancho and Graham put the cup back. Ryder Cup hero Graham McDowell believes September's encounter with the US at Whistling Straits should be postponed unless a viable tournament schedule can be put in place beforehand for qualifiers. You got the Times on?
Yeah, the London Times this morning. Olympians facing cut in lottery funds. So Britain's Olympians obviously get 2/3 of their funding from lottery sales in the United Kingdom. Lottery sales are down as a result of the coronavirus, so they could face a cut in their funding. The other third comes from the Exchequer. They have committed to paying up that 1/3 of their funding. So it's going to be a tricky year or so for UK athletes in terms of getting their funding for Tokyo 2021. We've also got that story that Wimbledon is on the brink and Eddie Jones has been asked to accept less pay.
The Irish News is finally one for me this morning, and we've got the Irish News. Oh, we got it in a minute. There it is there. Brown remains hopeful of taking giant steps in AFL. This is Callum Brown, who we were talking about. And shutdown extended to April 19th by GAA. That's the directive issued by the Director General and the President of the GAA yesterday to close all facilities until April 19th, and no more points kicking from anybody, please. 0879 180 180 is the number to WhatsApp us here if you want to get involved in our conversations this morning. It's 11 minutes past 8. Plenty more coming up in the next hour. Mayo star Andy Moran is going to join us from 8:15.